Welcome everybody to another episode of the Marketing Measurement Matters podcast. This time a restart because we had a rather longer pause on it, and this time also with Igor from Meta. Happy to have you on the show again. It's great to kind of restart it with someone who has already been on our podcast for 2 times. And what we thought we're going to do is do a kind of a bit of a look back into 2024. Go through some good papers that came out. You suggested to go through some. We also came up with some. But before we do that, maybe a quick reintroduction of who you are and what you've been up to in the past. And of course, we have Tim Kreinkamp with us here as well. Tim Wiegels, who usually also is co-host, he's in Thailand right now for 6 weeks. That's a bit annoying for us, but good for him. But yeah, over to you, Igor.
Hello, everyone. And thank you, Janos and team, for hosting me again on the Marketing Measurement Matter podcast. It's always a pleasure to chat with you through the latest and greatest papers or what's been happening in the industry. And I'm really excited about the restart and excited about the news you guys been through as well. So about myself, before we do that, so my name is Igor, or Iggy as everybody calls me. I'm a part of the Business Acceleration Solutions team here at Meta. I'm based in London. I was in Meta I'm at Meta for the past 9 years, and generally in the marketing science, marketing effectiveness space. My professional and personal research into MMM and marketing mix models, calibration, triangulation, the modern agile ways to do that. And always up for a good chat. So really excited about this.
Great. Yeah. So maybe also worth mentioning that something extremely exciting happened this year for us. As you kind of pointed at, we merged Atriwa with Funnel and kind of created this new awesome funnel measurement offering. And Funnel also, through that merger, had the possibility to rebrand into Marketing Intelligence Solutions. So I think that's quite interesting. But we're gonna not talk about that too much because there's also a lot of interesting papers and news that came up. Maybe also worth mentioning how we got to know you through shout out to Dr. Julian Runge. I think the way was we saw him authoring this pretty amazing paper on Harvard Business Review. It was the gold standard for marketing measurement, which you co-authored with Julian together. And Julian was quite busy back at the time and suggested we should talk to you. So again, thanks, Julian. If you'll hear this, we gotta get you on the show. Now that we have a proper setup, we have to get him on the show. Maybe also a joint session with you together, Igor. But that's how we got to know you, Igor. Maybe just start with asking Tim, what was your top announcement besides obviously the merger with Funnel for 24? What was the most amazing thing that happened in the marketing measurement world?
Yeah, so it might be a bit obvious, to be honest, for those of you who are following this space a bit more closely. But for us, or for me, the most defining topic of the year 2024 was triangulation. So that term used to be around before, but I think really the wholesale adoption of that term, not only the term, of course, but also the framework, that has been for me the defining topic of 2024. And that obviously unlocks many other topics, like, as you said before, calibration has been a topic in 2023 already, but really in 2024 it took off. Testing as well. So we've seen a much better adoption of testing this year than we had in 2023. Testing was a bit like teenage, let's say, intimacy. Everyone talked about it, but nobody really did it. And now actually many companies start actually dipping their toes into the testing water, getting more ambitious, more adventurous in that sense as well. So that was it for me. Iggy, what was the defining topic for you?
I think I'm just gonna quickly comment on this, and I kind of like, I think, and it's the it is the output of the entire industry, and a lot of the thought leadership that you see today actually contributes to it. So it's, for me, it's not like a one single moment that actually brings triangulation or calibration to the forefront, but it's been engagement across a spectrum of various players. So we see the academics like Julian or various professors all around the world start bringing the research into this space. We see the trade bodies like the IPA, ISBA, and similar ARF talking about this topic more and more this year. It's been the consultancies, Deloitte, Accenture, and many of these others again talking about how this can be done. And then you have like Meta, Google, and others as well. So actually, a whole spectrum of opinions and a whole spectrum of approaches around the same philosophical subject. So I think for me, I tend to agree that like it's becoming much more studied from theoretical perspective, which is great, but also from practical perspective, which is what advertisers and marketers want, because it's nice that we can have a great paper about it, but like, does it work in practice?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was a drawback of many. I mean, there weren't been quite a few publications on measurement topics in the past, but the question is always how practical are they, and are they even potentially being implemented? So I think that's great to see. And I mean, what do you say about the whole LinkedIn space? I mean, there's a lot of opinions on, and that's also something I think we experienced because we also a bit active on LinkedIn, that there's so many more people talking about measurement. Some really, really great content being put out there, but also some dogmatism. I saw a post by, I don't know if you've seen this, Iggy, from Eric Seufert, about some people being really dogmatic about their approaches and putting, if they sell, for example, MMM, really putting MMM as the holy grail up there, and everything else kind of being disregarded.
Yeah, I think one have to be careful with a lot of these kind of platforms and follow the science. I always say try to follow that's why I'm highlighting these academics or influential voices in the space, because the bar for having a scientific publication is, for example, very, very much higher, various peer reviews and quality bars versus just someone putting out there an opinion that is just formed in their head. So I think that's for me is like, I read a lot of this stuff, obviously, but I'm also careful to see what are the potential biases that person or that company could be exhibiting, or what are their sort of wider implications of it.
Should we dive into one publication or one paper that you really found noteworthy?
So I think for me the three kind of defining ones. I mean, we can kind of briefly summarize and see which one we choose. First one is combating misinformation in business analytics, and actually already mentioned it was published on Eric's blog. It was co-authored by Julian, but I think it really brings into the forefront for me all the the background of why observational causal inference and why actually the methods of studying, just why calibration and triangulation is so important, that and brings it to life in a very engaging way. I found the way how this is written in a very approachable and very practical and concrete way. So that would be one. The other one that I really liked was by.
Could you give a very quick summary of it?
So I think for me the summary of it is that we placing quite a lot of emphasis and quite a lot of hope in observational causal inference to deduce the impact of strategies
which is what? Sorry to I know it, but maybe for our audience.
How would you?
So basically, observational causal inference in that case means we try to get a causal estimate from observational data, and that specifically means that data wasn't created as part of a specifically designed experiment, but was just the data that was generated basically doing business. Right?
Which is usually what we have.
Is usually what we have. In some cases, we can only have observational data. Let's say, for example, a prime example is smoking. You can't randomly assign people into smoking and non-smoking groups because that's unethical. In other cases, it's just not practical. So when we come back more to the marketing measurement domain, it's the observational data is what we have. So marketing mix modeling, it's based on data that we just accrue while just going about our business, and that's the appealing thing about it, and that's why it's so good, OCI. But it's biased, unfortunately, because it doesn't rely on randomization. And it has a lot of biases in there that we don't need to go into detail right here. Endogeneity, selection bias, all of that.
Omitted variables bias, yeah.
Exactly.
So I really like how they actually laid it out in the article. So we will obviously share it in the description of this episode and afterwards. But I thought that it's one of the, for me, really, really influential texts that many businesses should consider when.
And really makes the point that, for me as a summary also, is that only doing MMM can be tricky, and that you need to or should look into other sources for measurement estimates.
And that's why I liked last year so much, 2024, because for me the year of triangulation is the year where dogmatism finally ended. Because beforehand we were looking for the holy grail, or the one method to rule it all. And I think we all remember when we first started working with tracking data, and we started working with MTA, we were like, oh yeah, this is so good, and what you can measure, you can manage, and let's just do digital advertising, and it's so accurate, and we can do deep learning and GRUs and LSTM and whatnot. It's really cool, and we find out everything automatically. Obviously, that wasn't true. Same thing when an MMM first, got revived. We were talking a lot about how do we actually fit MMMs. We didn't talk so much about how we validate them. And then we kind of noticed with both methods that, they're going to tell us something, but that something is not necessarily going to be correct. So now we are at like, okay, how do we actually validate that? And how do we actually triangulate and fence in, approximate the truth?
Which actually really nicely leads into my second article that I found really influential, and it was the IPA Making Effectiveness Work 2024 report. A couple of months ago published. That was Duncan Stoddard and Simeon Duckworth and team, and they actually, for what I found, really influential piece, because it's very practical and actually emphasizes an active learning culture and adopting formalized learning agendas to overcome some of this fragmentation and silos within organization. And actually, what I found, it's very practical. So like, again, from the Julian's and Eric's article is great, but again, it provides you the why you should do this and like where is the challenge, and then this report I found very practical guidance for marketers to design measurement strategies to maximize learnings, minimize silos, overcome that the challenge, do triangulation, and combine MMM experiments and attribution in very meaningful ways. It introduces some process. I think they call it MESSI, like model, experiment, simulate, and implement, which is, I thought, an interesting way also to describe this. And I thought that it's very practical. It became quite popular in the UK, but I think the scope of it is obviously could be global or outside of UK.
And I also read it, and what I found out, they really have these templates for how to create learning agendas for different levels of marketing decision making. So for operational, tactical, and strategical, and what kind of methods should be used within each. So really practical. Also, we're gonna put all of that in the notes. And then speaking of that, maybe. One of my favorite things was the playbook that Google put out. And I found it really noteworthy because, there's always the saying that Google was gaining a lot through, pushing Google Analytics. But them now also talking about triangulation. I don't think they call it triangulation in the actual...
I think they do, yeah.
They do?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Well, anyhow. That I found quite noteworthy, and they have some quite practical example for performance marketing managers on how to, let the two systems talk to each other, how you can use results from experimentation into calibrating your bidding strategies on Google Ads. So that was, I think, also quite noteworthy. We had Anna, the author, on our podcast as well. So for whoever wants to revisit that. One thing, though, I think we need to be careful about is not letting triangulation itself become a dogmatism, because it can easily be seen as us as a vendor, for example, to say triangulation is the holy grail now. We should only do triangulation in this and that and this way and not in that way. And I think that would be completely against the idea of doing triangulation, because for some brands, they might just not have the possibility to include tracking-based MTA data, or others can't do experiments that regularly. So I think that's also important to keep in mind, that we just need to be open-minded about the approaches. And maybe in 1 or 2 years, there are other approaches popping up that we haven't seen or understood yet. I don't know.
Exactly. So it's not the Holy Grail, but probably, in my own biased opinion, it's the best that we have right now. And maybe in 1 or 2 years, that looks completely different. And that's where this continuous learning agenda comes into play. Iggy, so from what you've said so far, and I think what we all said here on the show, is that it actually sounds like it's a lot of work getting Triangulation up and running. What's your take on that? How do you see that being an issue with brands or not?
I think it's all about, like, the other big piece that we see in the industry and we hear about is about actionability and making sure that people can actually action the findings. So for me, it's a balance between like what the effort that needs to go in and the output that you can get out of it. And as long as there is a positive, there's a positive ROI on the tool that you are doing on Triangulation or any process or even MMM itself, you need to see that it is worth the effort. And like, how are you going to do that? We see obviously, experiments, make sure that you're experimenting with this, but actionability, making sure that you can actually bring to practice some of those findings and learnings as much as automatically, then it becomes even more so. Sort of it starts to pay back, and to that front, I think the one other important and I would say almost like a landmark update that Meta have made this year is this that we became introducing new ways for businesses to pass back information from their attribution systems or from their analytics systems or the kind of value that they see, to try to close the loop between a system that is Triangulation or MMM or MTA and the ad delivery systems. Yeah. And I think that, this, in my opinion, on its own is going to actually help us all, prove that measurement can become such a strong pillar in activation.
Yeah, and that's such an important point, because you can have all the beautiful triangulation in place and whatever you believe the Holy Grail to be in measurement. But if you don't start acting upon the insights, all of that is just, worthless. And the ROI is not going to be great on that, and you're just losing money. So I think it's great that, the app platforms and Meta in that case is opening up in that way, because it's so crucial also to make sure that you automate as much as possible of that. So, because I think one important thing we have to keep in mind is, with all this science now also coming back into the measurement space, is that not every marketing manager has the time to read all these papers, and their main job might just not be to understand the algorithms in detail and choose the best tool for every single use case. They have a budget and they need to spend it. Yeah, and if they don't spend it, they might not even have the same budget next year. So that's how they operate.
The main job of the marketer is not triangulation or measurement, the MMM, whatever. The main job of the marketer is to make more money with the budget they have, right? So that is something also we as an industry should never lose track of. And I think that's actually where it's really good that you guys have at Meta, that you make it more easy to spend the money more effectively using advanced attribution methods. Because otherwise, you're always going to have that, let's say, human element in there, which is, it's good, of course, but it leads to extra friction.
Yeah. And I think this is even more important in, as we kind of move into the 2025, and obviously all the hype about automation, about AI and AI analytics and AI marketing mix models, and however this is going to play out, what kind of guardrails are we going to have in place, and how are we actually going to make sure that all these more and more automated systems are actually providing it's kind of end-to-end value, from the data ingestion and the data integration, then the modeling. And this is where, some of the stuff we spoke about earlier, like the experiment, calibrate and validate, make sure that the models itself is triangulated well and makes sense. Then through to, the culture and the learning agendas, and making sure there is there's a system there into like the best way how AI can be infused in this process, and then all the way to closing the loop through some of these, say, platform-specific activations and sending data back for activation. So as we move through that process into 2025. I think it's like hugely exciting to begin with. I see, the industry sort of rallying behind. We have the academics, we have the consultants, we have measurement partners, vendors, agencies, technology companies coming together for this. And I think it's just going to be for a huge benefit of the advertisers. So as long as this is executed well, and I work at Meta because I believe technology can solve some of our biggest challenges that we have as marketers, or even beyond into as humans. So I'm hugely excited about this.
Yeah, and I mean, we mustn't forget, like we had to start looking at MMM and non-tracking based measurement methodologies because of some of the tracking and privacy, data privacy regulations. And back then we thought, or I just had a discussion internally as well, it seems like marketeers are blinded almost. But with all those developments now, it seems that they are actually able to see the forest instead of all the single trees and just tracking data. They're able to understand, incrementality. They can bring in offline media effects or non-marketing effects. So I think that's something that I remember when we started in 2015 and then also 2017 and GDPR came up, we thought this is like, how are we going to solve this measurement piece? Like there's so many effects that we cannot account for. And now we're getting somewhere, not to the, it's not the final state. Let's see if we ever get there, but at least, there's light at the end of the tunnel, it seems.
Exactly. And I think also on the positive side, a lot of research, a lot of academics went into this measurement space that led into triangulation. Mm-hmm. On the slightly more negative side, is also born out of a lot of frustration with existing tools, right? Yeah. And that's because maybe in the past, not all the available measurement programs or software really accounted for that very well, right?
Actually, like what I tend to realize this year is that measurement is becoming a competitive advantage yet again. So maybe some of the systems we have in the past became so uniformic that everybody was using the same system. Now, I think getting it right, we will see the brands who actually do this right, who understands how this works for them, for their brands. We're gonna see acceleration of growth and acceleration of sales because measurement is yet again becoming a competitive advantage, I believe. And just like with anything in life, you need to be sort of always on, you need to be consistent. And it's more important that you do something consistently and consistently aligned process to see those results versus, and it doesn't matter if you're gonna go for a run or go to the gym or do attribution, you need to do it consistently. And then you start seeing some of these benefits over time. So I'm really, really excited about this, that dots started to connect, to your point, Janos. They're like, this year dots, in my opinion, have started to connect much more than any other years into maybe 5-7 years. Yeah. And this is really exciting. It's a really exciting time.
We have a bit of time left just for an Outlook 25. What will be the top, maybe let's reduce it to the top 2 things or top 3 if you need to, things that gonna happen in 25 in measurement. Tim, let's start with you.
First of all, don't hold us accountable at the end of next year because predictions are hard, specifically when they are about the future. What I see is, although I said before, like the marketing team is business or task is to drive more revenue, I see the marketing team getting way more involved next year. So we see way more people knowing about MMM. We see C-levels knowing about MMM. We will see the finance department, the CFO getting involved with marketing planning, media mix modeling, and integrating that tighter into financial planning. That's one thing that we're going to see. We are also going to see more adoption of like SaaS-based triangulation solutions, which so far there aren't so many. So there are a lot of MMM solutions, MDA solutions, testing solutions. We're going to see a lot more integrated solutions, not more players in this space.
I think I spoke about some of this more like a continuation of this year and like kind of maturing into next year. So I'm just gonna kind of comment on 2 other projects that I'm hugely excited about. One is the World Federation of Advertisers project. It's Project Halo is the master, and then Project Origin in the UK and Project Aquila in the UK. So they will, at first phases, provide us with deduplicated reach and frequency from a single source system. But their progress towards using this kind of data in MMM and using this kind of data for planning and optimization, I'm hugely excited about this. And there is open source techniques that are dealing with this as how do we going to integrate reach and frequency into MMM. Obviously, Google's Meridian, Robin, we released a functionality that can deal with this. We're also releasing Robin in Python as we speak now.
That's an important one.
That's an important
very
one.
important, very important.
Yes, so maybe I'll pause there. But,
Reiterate on that, yeah.
But I'm hugely excited about a new consistent data source that will come obviously first to UK and the US, but my understanding is this is a global push by the WFA to do that.
Amazing. I don't think I have anything really relevant to add, only that I think server-side tracking will become more important and people realize again the value of tracking data, even though it's highly restricted to mostly click-based data. So that's one thing. I wouldn't call it renaissance of MTA, so I probably wouldn't go there. And then also I think the second most important development will be that people will start to realize more. So I think you put it into the show notes as well, this e-marketers list. I think it's 61% of marketing people having better, faster media mix modeling, interestingly enough, as their goal for the next 12 months or something like that. So I think people will realize what they actually want is measurement and not necessarily only MMM. So that's my top two predictions in this way.
That makes sense. Yeah. I think we're gonna see some really interesting evolutions next year. I think more and more platforms and more. I think we're kind of looping all the way to the beginning of this show, where we said many more people are involved in the thought leadership around this space, and I think I think this is really what excites me about our industry is like when we can come together as a community of people and put our heads together and solve some of the hardest and most gnarly problems in measurement, and I think that's where really the biggest progress happens, and I'm thinking this is going to be more the case in next year, and I'm really looking forward to like engaging different industry stakeholders and playing our role as meta marketing science in this space.
Great, awesome, great kind of conclusion and summary of the things that we discussed. So thanks, Igor, for being on this podcast for the third time and the first time in a more professional setup. So great to have you again, really insightful. And when you come to Hamburg, let us know. Definitely stop by for coffee. Thanks, Tim, also, of course, to be here. And then maybe also for everyone who hasn't subscribed to our channel yet, do so on all the relevant podcasting platforms and listen into the next one. We're going to continue publicizing a lot of new episodes frequently now.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Janos. Bye.